Welcome to Energy Talks, a regular podcast series with expert discussions on power system testing topics. My name is Scott Williams from the podcast team at Omicron, and I will be your host. Hello, everyone. In this episode, we will talk about the advantages of using temporary online partial discharge monitoring to help keep an eye on PD activity between diagnostic measurements. Joining me for this discussion are Omicron PD experts Bogdan Gorgan and Patrick Sander. Both have joined me before on Energy Talks for discussions about partial discharge testing and monitoring. In this episode, Bogdan and Patrick will describe the differences between temporary PD monitoring and PD diagnosis, when temporary PD monitoring makes sense, and how both PD monitoring and PD diagnosis complement each other to help you assess the insulation condition of your electrical assets and make condition-based maintenance decisions. Hi, Bogdan. Welcome back to Energy Talks.
Hello, Scott. Happy to be back.
Patrick, thank you for joining us again.
Hey, Scott. Also from my side, happy to be back.
Thank you both again for being here for this discussion. Bogdan, could you describe the key differences between partial discharge diagnostic measurements and partial discharge monitoring?
Yes, PD diagnostic measurements can be done with the asset offline or online. So the asset offline means that you need to have a separated voltage source to energize the asset, and online it means that the asset is connected to the grid. So in order to understand more about the results, a powerful diagnostic software has to be used with features like, example, an adjustable bandpass filter, existence of PD separation methods like our 3-part and 3-FRAC methods, options for gating, be able to record streams and also to replay that. But not only, you need to have the possibility to adapt the settings for better results visualization. And here I refer to scaling of the different results, etc. So, and also the diagnostic measurements typically are done periodically, which means within larger time intervals, every 6 months, 1 year or 2 years, as spot measurements, but the duration is only few hours. So, whereas if I go to PD monitoring is when the PD equipment is left connected to the installed sensors for a long time, for weeks to years, and the PD data is continuously recording during this time without the need for the user to interfere whatsoever. Additionally, alarms can be configured when we monitor, based on the different recording parameters.
Okay. How is temporary PD monitoring beneficial between diagnostic measurements?
Yeah, very nice question. Temporary PD monitoring is covering the time between the periodic diagnostic measurements, during which the insulation condition or how a defect evolves is unknown. And the rate at which a PD increases is unknown and really unpredictable. And by looking or by observing the signals in time, the necessary actions can be taken. Additionally, if you looking at the signals in time, I repeat myself once again, a correlation with load or temperature can be done in relation to PD, and also the disturbance signals or noise signals can be easier and faster identified.
Okay, thank you, Bogdan. Patrick, what is PD trending and how is it used to assess the insulation condition of electrical assets?
Yeah, I mean, trending, as the name already says, this is over a particular time. So can be continuous trending like in the monitoring system, or can be temporary monitoring as Bogdan just has described. But trending, like the idea with it is to see a change over time. So if there's a suspicion for PD defects within a certain asset, people would connect a monitoring or temporary monitoring system to the asset to trend the relative change over time. So it's not to identify the root cause or definitely the cause of the PD, but it's, for example, suspected to have PD, or there is strong PD activity, and we want to see if this is changing over time. So that's what we refer to trending in that case.
Okay. How is the trend data received different from PD diagnostic measurements?
Also here, it's quite similar to the diagnostic measurement itself, but I mean, the diagnostic measurement is a spot measurement, or can be various spot measurements at a particular time or a particular date. So we're doing a couple of tests. That's diagnostic measurements. And in trend, basically, or in trending in that case, basically, we are applying similar measurement frequency, so measurement detection settings and stuff to the trend session itself, but we will keep the trend running. So instead of clicking and executing the measurement on our own, sitting in front of a computer to do that, we would have the computer and the monitoring service doing that for us for the designated time that we set it up for.
Okay. Patrick, when should you use temporary PD monitoring, and what is recommended, or what is the recommended length of a monitoring session?
Also, as I said before, I personally would always use temporary monitoring, for example, if I have a new asset, which I energize for the first time, like as the initial phase of a new asset, to see if there's something suspicious happening in that time frame, or vice versa, if I have an aged asset and I'm suspicious that something might be happening with that particular asset, and I wanna verify that there's something happening or something appearing in certain conditions. That's where I would use temporary monitoring, or simply when I have a huge amount of assets where I wouldn't invest into permanent monitoring systems for every single asset, but rather would have a temporary monitoring system circle around them. Like, for example, do a measurement or monitoring session on that particular asset for a week, then go to the next one and so on. And the recommended length depends a little bit on the asset, I would say. I mean, if we would look at the cable application, normally we wouldn't expect any PD to be happening there. So it wouldn't make sense, at least in my opinion, to leave a temporary monitoring system connected to a cable for 12 weeks or something. So I would say if nothing is changing within 1 or 2 weeks, then it should be okay. But I would give it a couple of days. So personally, I always refer to temporary monitoring as a session, or when a session has a duration of some days to some weeks. Of course, it can be extended also to a couple of months, but typically I would recommend something between a couple of days and a couple of weeks.
Patrick, how are users informed that there is a problem, and what are the next steps to take?
This depends a little bit on what type or what application we're using. For example, in temporary monitoring, the benefit of having a temporary monitoring system is you can leave it at site. So you would go there, connect everything, and set everything up so that the device can be left at site. And then typically you would retrieve the device and analyze the data from there. So in that specific case, you would see it when you analyze the data, but you could also connect the temporary monitoring system to the internet through a LTE router, for example, and look at the data in real time and analyze that. Or you could set certain thresholds to trigger alarms and warnings, and then get notified through an email. So granting you would have connected it to some kind of a network or internet. Same would apply for the permanent monitoring system. So if you have that connected to the internet or to the network, you can trigger alarms and warnings through email. You can look at the data, and of course, at the latest, when somebody, either, for example, Omicron experts or service providers, are analyzing the data, somebody would know that. And then based on the analyzation and based on the recommendation from the analyzation and from the expert report, we or the service provider would notify the customer that there's this or that problem, or it might be a solution to do this and that to solve the problem. So typically it's all linked to the analyzation of data.
So in terms of triggering an alarm, it has a lot to do with the thresholds previously set by the user. Is that correct?
That is correct. So one thing, maybe it's drifting a little bit too much into theory and the technical stuff, but what we have to remember in the online application, also in the trending application, we are not worrying too much about the absolute values. Of course, the absolute values of charge are triggering warnings and alerts based on the thresholds, as you just said. But that's one thing to remember. We are looking at the relative change. But for example, if we would be saying we are setting the measurement and the monitoring session up, and we just see a background noise, or we just see a regular data of, say, I would just say 10 nanocoulombs as an example. Based on that, the user would set the warning and alarm thresholds. And if this is exceeded, then first the warning would be triggered. And as an escalation, then the alarm would be triggered. So it's always linked to the individual settings the user or we are setting it up for.
Very good. Patrick, will temporary PD monitoring play an increasing role in asset condition assessment?
To be honest, I'm not sure if temporary monitoring per se, so emphasizing the temporary monitoring, will play an increasing role. What I would say is that generally monitoring, and also, of course, PD monitoring, is playing an increasing role over time. It's not just linked to the electrical industry, right? I mean, there's a trend in the industry and in certain applications to have more sensors installed, to have more monitoring, to have more values as we go agenting with certain assets, certain devices. So I would say generally the trend towards monitoring and condition-based maintenance, that's definitely increasing. And with that, automatically, I think PD monitoring and also temporary PD monitoring would increase, as well as the general trend to condition-based maintenance.
Very good. Thank you, Patrick. Bogdan, which diagnostic features are available in temporary PD monitoring systems, like, for example, Omicron's Montesto 200, and which are not?
The Montesto 200 has the possibility to adjust the measurement frequency. The PD signals and disturbance signals are automatically separated within the three-part diagram, and we can suggest, or the software automatically can suggest the most probable defect type, but this is also this is only active for available for rotating machines, as I said, based on a library of known defects and disturbance signals. And all these features are available within the monitoring software, which is very powerful. However, the device doesn't have the diagnostic software powerful enough. And this diagnostic software with the features that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, and it doesn't allow the freedom to the user to identify and evaluate and go in deep analysis, looking at the measurement results. Also, I have to mention that there is no compatibility with other diagnostic devices like our PDL650, the acoustic locator that can be used on power transformers, or the new UHF 800 device. The reason is that the Montesto 200 is to be used as a trending device, exactly to target the applications what Patrick just mentioned. Yeah. So all the looking at the data, as for a few days to a few weeks, especially between PD diagnostic or PD spot measurements.
Okay, so just for an example, if you were to pick up on something in the PD diagnostic measurement and you want to keep an eye on it, trending with a temporary PD monitoring system might be the answer, just to see how it behaves under operating conditions. Is that correct?
Exactly, yes.
Very good, thank you. What should you use then instead for PD diagnostics, and why?
Yeah, so instead, to do partial discharge diagnostics, we have to use our MPD 800 system because it has the hardware flexibility, compatibility with the other, with the different devices that I mentioned to do more diagnostics, and it has the diagnostic software that allows all the flexibility, and also is a requirement with the IEC 6270 standard, which I didn't mention previously.
Okay. Now you had mentioned the MPD 800 system, for example. Could you describe the PD trending feature available with our PD diagnostic solution, MPD 800? And with this feature, why do you still need a solution for temporary PD monitoring?
Yes, it is true that the MPD 800 has a PD trending feature. And this feature provides the users with support for triggering the measurement based on different conditions. For example, it's possible to automatically save PRPD screenshots or record data set files when these conditions are met. You can choose after a certain time interval to save the data, or when a measurement reading exceeds the threshold that you configured for a certain time. And this is possible for a few hours. Yeah, for a few hours only. And this is the key here, that when you like to record the data or to trend for a few days, 2 weeks or months, then the MPD-800 can't do that, and the Montesto can.
Now, speaking of both temporary PD monitoring and PD diagnostics, doing both naturally is much easier if you have some convenience built in. And one of the ways in which we do that is through a terminal box. How does the Omicron terminal box play a role in convenience of switching between temporary PD monitoring and PD diagnostics?
Yes, with the terminal box is convenient because the sensors, the PD sensors that are permanently installed, connected to the asset, then their output is connected to the terminal box, which means that now the user can, without taking the asset offline, can simply open the box and make connections to your diagnostic or a trending device. So I find it really convenient, as well as the online, taking also the advantage that the asset is online, and which is offering the more accurate operation. No, this is the way that the asset is in operation. So you consider all the parameters that can affect the PD as well. I'm just saying that it's simple way to perform either diagnostic measurement or temporary monitoring, because it's easy to use. Yeah.
Thank you, Bogdan. Patrick, after using a temporary PD monitoring system like Omicron's Montesto 200, what makes asset managers eventually decide to install permanent PD monitoring systems for nonstop online PD trending?
I think this strongly depends on the type of asset and also on the type of maintenance strategy of the customer. Right? For example, either through the temporary monitoring or through even spot measurements as a diagnostic measurement, the customer is suspecting something or even has found out that there is something which is ongoing, something critical to his asset, for example, a critical type of PD. For example. So now the question is, can he really afford to only do a couple of tests every now and then, or even leave a temporary monitoring system there for a couple of days, couple of weeks? Or is the asset important enough for him, or as important to really justify a permanent monitoring system to be permanently installed? So there are, I wouldn't say there's a black and white answer to this, or a left or right answer. I think it really depends on the individual situation and also on the individual maintenance strategy of the customers. Like in some industries, it's not really too critical to have an asset that is failing, right? You have exchange motors, for example, you have spare parts and stuff. So it fails, you change it, nothing really happens. But for example, looking in petrochemical industries or something like that, where it's really, really critical if something is failing, because the whole process would be stopping and hundred thousands or even millions of euros or dollars are wasted just because of the unplanned downtime, then it's really, really critical. And then people would decide to go permanent in that case, right? So it's a little bit of individual situation, but as long as somebody would justify there is a critical defect and I can't afford to only know certain conditions or certain times what's happening, then they would install or they would invest into a permanent monitoring system typically.
Okay. Do you agree that even with permanently installed PD monitoring systems, PD diagnostic measurements are still needed to be performed when a potential problem is observed? And why?
Also answering a little bit with maintenance strategy. Yes, I would totally agree to this. I mean, it's really, can I afford to do this? For example, looking at a big power plant, depending on the operator of that power plant, sometimes you have like every 4 years you have a minor overhaul, every other 4 years, so 8 in total, you have a major overhaul of that power plant or that block. So in these times where you have a plant outage, I would still invest into diagnostic measurements, for example, in the power plant for the motors and for the generator. So I would definitely do that, but depending on certain things where you don't have the possibility of having these outages regularly, or if you have these outages, you have other things that you need to take care of, then it's a little bit of a compromise, and it really is down to the maintenance strategy. But ideally, like in an ideal scenario, I would always make an offline diagnostic measurement whenever I can, and I would combine that and I would correlate these data or data streams that I gather from the tests and from the diagnostic measurements and correlate and analyze them with the online conditions. So definitely a yes, but it's really dependent on the situation.
Okay, great. Give me your biggest benefit for temporary PD monitoring. Patrick, let me start with you.
The biggest benefit, I would say, you definitely have an overview of the online and on-site conditions. Like if you only do spot measurements every now and then during outage, you have, for example, coming back, I'm a machine guy, so coming back to the motors and generators, you would see normally the machine would be switched off, isolated, and for example, the winding would be cold. So you have a different situation that you would have online. So in that case, I mean, we could argue having also online measurements, then you also see this particular time frame in an online condition. But maybe in that situation, something critical is happening because of external circumstances. So you wouldn't know, is that really the real situation or the usual situation? So you would always have just this particular time frame. And with temporary monitoring, on the other hand, you have a bigger overview. So you have more samples, so you can estimate and you can analyze, and you can also justify your analyzation and your recommendation that you take away from the analyzation more, because you have more samples, you have a longer time frame that you monitor and that you assess the condition. So that's definitely one of the major advantages for temporary monitoring. And looking a little bit into like the financial aspects, of course, a huge benefit is you only have one device and you only install sensors permanently on the assets. So it's compared to permanent monitoring system on all assets, it's rather affordable compared to a full-blown monitoring system for all your assets.
Okay, very good. So just to confirm, you can use the same instrument, same system on various assets.
That is correct.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Bogdan, what is your biggest benefit of temporary PD monitoring?
Yeah, so for me, I would go side by side with Patrick. Is you simply have more data. Yeah, you simply have more data. You collect more data. So especially when you compare with a spot measurement, yeah, because you can also do just an online measurement. And if it's easy to identify that there is a PD, you can look how is the degradation rate. Yeah, it's increasing fast, it's increasing slow. In many times or in almost all the time, you have disturbance signals that are overlapping with your PD signals. Yeah. So having just a spot measurement, it's quite complicated to really look and identify and say, okay, I'm pretty sure that this is PD or not. And having more data to look at and to see how this are changing in time, then in my opinion, it's much more easier to confirm, with a high accuracy that yes, this is a potential defect and it needs to be monitored even a longer time.
Very good. Bogdan, where can our listeners get more information about the PD diagnostic and PD monitoring trending solutions we mentioned in this episode?
Yeah, so generally, I mean, the information it's available first of all on our website, www.omicronenergy.com. Over there, you have sections like products or applications, where you can find a lot of information. Also, if you go to the section called training, then you can apply for a training, or you can join one of our scheduled trainings that are available also online nowadays. And we are offering also webinars that are recorded, so people can visualize that. And additionally, yes, a very important thing that Omicron is generally present in the different conferences, IEEE magazines, SIGRE working groups, etc. So people can find our work also published there.
Thank you very much, Bogdan and Patrick, for this discussion about the benefits of temporary PD monitoring and trending performed between diagnostic PD measurements in this episode of Energy Talks.
Yeah, also thank you for the invitation, Scott, and thanks a lot for giving us the chance to more clearly explain the differences between the diagnostics and temporary monitoring. And I hope that the listeners after this podcast, they have a clear understanding or picture of what is which and what is which. Thank you.
Also from my side, thank you very much for having us. It's always good to talk about this complex application, PD testing, PD monitoring. Feel free to reach out to us or to the colleagues anytime. It's always good to talk about these things, and thank you for listening.
Thank you both very much for this discussion. And a big thank you to our audience for listening to this episode of Energy Talks. We always welcome your questions and feedback. Simply send us an email to podcast@omicronenergy.com. Omicron has several years of experience in power system testing and offers you the matching solution for your application. This includes partial discharge testing and monitoring, which was the topic of this episode. For more information, be sure to visit our website at omicronenergy.com. There, be sure to look under Training, where you will find information about Omicron Academy courses and webinars on partial discharge measurement and analysis, as well as many other power system testing topics. Under Events, you will find information about upcoming exhibitions and seminars around the world where you can meet us in person. Please join us to listen to the next episode of Energy Talks. Goodbye for now, everyone.